today I am so happy to have a conscious man on board. His name is Dr. Ray Doctor. So
You can
it's
call me just Dr. Ray.
Dr. Ray.
Yes.
And he has received his doctoral degree in clinical psychology. Prior to that, he earned a master's degree in counseling psychology and his undergraduate degree in human behavior. Over the past 22 years, he has worked as a self-mastery coach, workshop facilitator, author, and speaker. So I am very thrilled to invite Dr. Ray to this summit. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, that's such a pleasure. And I know that you also moved a bit from the traditional practice and you integrated a lot of other modalities into your work.
Absolutely, especially for this work we're going to talk about, because if traditional talk therapy is all in the head and sexual wounding is in the body, there's so much more to it. So talking about it's not necessarily going to heal it. It has to be both. And so we'll get more into that. So, and not just that, is I just have a great spiritual practice. That's just who I am. So I feel as though I should be doing what I'm doing in my work. So I can't, I can't be all in my head and kind of traditional. So this kind of fits for me anyway.
Right. Yeah. So is it something that you picked up through your work with clients, or is it your own experience?
I've been on this path since I was a teenager, but it's more me. I work very intuitive. Like, for just a little side story, I did have two near-death experiences, one when I was 6 years old, another one when I was 16 years old. So when I crossed over and came back, especially when I was 16, I noticed that I was able to really feel people very easily and see their points of view, maybe the energy and where they're coming from, and also started to become pretty good at communicating and understanding both the masculine and feminine type of communication. So this kind of found itself, and on this, as I was working on my spiritual path and already was a practitioner, I decided, okay, I'm going to go this other way and become a doctor in clinical psychology. And it was to learn more about that also and to expand. And I thought that was a direction, but it really came more from a place of insecurity that I wanted to have initials next to my name and be officially Dr. A. So, you know, my mentor at the time when I went back to school, he said, you know, you're just going to learn what you know already. And there was some truth in that, but I needed to go through the experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is totally my experience on my own journey that you cannot heal anything through the mind. It needs to come through the body. And we also get hurt in relationship and we get healed in relationship. Do you agree with that part?
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so why is sexual trauma often confusing and has so many mixed messages about it?
Why does sexual trauma often confusing and delayed and have so many mixed messages? Is that what you asked?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so my response is that, first off, is that we have sex, so it's something that is part of our lives. So it's something that hopefully we enjoy. If it was with a family member and that was someone who's supposed to protect us, provide for us, that can create further confusion. If it is the one person who used to give us attention, that could be very confusing. Also, there could have been some, say, moment of pleasure or like excitement, but not knowing at that age that it probably wasn't appropriate, which is also confusing. It is a topic where many people don't understand it themselves, to where they deny it, they deny talking about it. So a person who's been traumatized might feel uncomfortable, but what they're feeling also is the awkwardness of the person of the conversation. And here's a big one, and that is how it's associated to how people support us and are becoming in that moment. And what I mean by that is, imagine a person being traumatized, and it happened to be when they're about to go to college. And what I mean by that is that this actually happened. And a client shared with me that she was 17 years old and she was checking out this new campus. And it was out of state. and she was raped. And so this showed up in her life to where whenever she was advancing herself or getting a promotion, this would come up. And she didn't connect that to what had happened, say the rape. And so oftentimes what's happening in our lives, another person shared with me that she was homeless at the time and a drug user. And it happened during a day in a Vons parking lot at a grocery store. And she swears that people could see or hear what was happening in the car. But because of how she looked, and she looked homeless or whatever, even when she reported it to the police, they just looked at her like, what do you expect? And so the thing is that when I worked with these clients that I just mentioned, that we didn't focus so much on the act itself, how it was integrated is more what we worked on. In other words, even one of them worked on us with 5 different therapists. But when we went into the story, the energies and attachments that are associated to it and released that, it also released the trauma that was holding in place. It's almost like this. For example, sometimes when people have a family member that passes, just say especially if it were a dad or mom, and they never had that conversation, and that person, say, was an alcoholic or abusive, sometimes it turns into complicated grief because letting go of them is also letting go of the story of that victimization. Letting go of them is also forgetting that they never said sorry to them. So sometimes there's like this other attached association that people are not aware of that gets kind of caught up in the trauma itself, and therefore it's associated to that versus the act of trauma itself. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. It does make sense. From my own experience, I have been molested by my stepfather when I was between, I think, 7 and 10, and then later on again. And what happened is that I actually experienced an orgasm when I was 9 years old. And although my body was frozen and I was completely not connected to my body, it's still, that was a natural wired for pleasure body experience, and it wired up my orgasmic flow with so much shame and guilt and blame and disgust for centuries later.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that unwiring, that this is the healing, right? That's when we can shift what has been integrated in our body as a somatic
Yes, I'm so
experience.
happy you share that, because sometimes I feel uncomfortable saying that because I had not had that experience. I just have heard this over 500 times from different women, and I understand that. I told you about the pleasure part, and you brought that up. That could be very confusing. To
Right.
also, I've worked with clients where they like, say, rough sex, and it's associated to what had happened when they were a child. It's that somehow they connect that the way for them to experience this is tied into what had happened, what once happened. Now, this doesn't mean if a person really likes that, there's something wrong with that. People do have fetishes, but there's also some people where that is where it stems from. There's some sexual abuse or something that connected to pain, connected to being, pushed down or something like that.
Right. So you work a lot with women and men that experience sexual trauma. And what is your secret sauce? What is the approach that you almost always manage to shift things?
Well, first off, it's asking the right questions, such as what I just mentioned, and that was where I talk about the events before the trauma, how the person was feeling about him or herself, and how it was supported. While we do talk about the trauma, this story and this other story is just as important and valid. So in that process is that we look at the associations. We move the conversation into the body. We do breath work. We do other, the main thing we do is get to, say, the transparent belief that was there. For example, you might ask, well, what does that even mean? So I mentioned two people. So the woman who was in the car, her thought and how it affected her for like 20 years afterwards was this: I'm not safe, meaning that it's daylight. I can't trust the police. I can't trust anyone. I don't feel supported. We healed that. That healed the trauma. Okay. So, and she also connected that to like her spiritual journey, her path, that this trust issue had been there before she had even been raped. So not only did it heal the trauma, it went back to kind of her core story, maybe why she immersed in this physical body, to be so much more and to trust, divine timing in herself. And then the other person had a hand put over her mouth and a knife to her throat. And the perpetrator said that if you tell anyone, I'll kill you. And before she even went to, embark on, this journey to check out this college, her parents were like telling her she shouldn't go. In fact, even told her when this happened that we told you so, which is a horrible thing to say. Tell your teenage daughter. But the association was this. It came to the trust issues, but a big one was this: that I can't trust my own decisions. I cannot trust my own decisions. So she doubted herself when that happened, and she kind of believed what her parents said. And just choosing men, making executive decisions, she had a lot of anxiety. That trauma really kind of put that in her body, so it started to show up in other places in her life. So she had to heal that story, that narrative, and it was that I can make good decisions. I can make good decisions for myself. I can start trusting myself and moving into that space, and that's what healed her.
Right. So it seems like inside we are always whole and perfect, and the trauma happens on the periphery. And if we heal the narrative and we process the feelings that maybe were stuck at the time or weren't safe enough to express, then we can let that trauma leave the body and return to wholeness, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this is, I believe, the essence of your work.
Yes. It's getting to the transparent beliefs and the energy of those transparent beliefs. Because it's one thing to say, I didn't feel trust, or I now trust, but what does that state feel like in your body? That's why it's important to do the somatic work.
Right. And you mentioned that the negative experience itself is not typically what creates the trauma, but more how the person processes. So, and supported. So how can a person unwind their story? How can they create a new healthy narrative?
So first off, it would be start off by releasing the energy of guilt, pain, and denied energy first. Now, what I mean by that is you have, like you said, you mentioned you had your shame. So it's being able to connect to that, to be able to feel that, to breathe that into your body. It might be happening where you give yourself permission to do yoga on your own, to stretch. It might be where even, when you're touched by somebody like a massage worker, even though it's like benign and safe, you feel this. You might bring a friend or have it done where, and I've noticed this with people, especially with women in their thighs, where it has released that energy. It's to be able to cry, not attaching that to anything, that you have to do anything with it or whatever. It's just to first feel that energy to move through your body so you can experience that, because you maybe never released that. Like, for example, when other, like say, predators, try to attack a prey, like a deer, if a deer escapes, the deer ends up shaking itself off to get rid of that energy, therefore doesn't experience PTSD. So many human beings have trapped energy in their bodies. So it'd be first releasing energy, and then secondly, we'd be looking at your own judgments that creates more resistance to let go of the energy. Like, I was at fault. I shouldn't think this way. I had pleasure, whatever, to let go of that. Then allow yourself to write down both positive and negative thoughts you have about sexuality. That might be interesting because you might have a narrative that doesn't even support your healing and has nothing to do with the trauma, but outside of what had happened, you are uncomfortable with sexuality because your culture or religion, which is what maybe is in, is all associated to trauma, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. And then the next part is to create a narrative that you prefer. And what I mean by that is, how would I like to feel? How would I like to experience my body? What would it be like to open myself up to a partner? And if there's still resistance, of course, seek help. Seek someone like you yourself, and just keep asking yourself the same questions. Like, why would I resist this? Why would I have judgments? What could happen if I were to be free in my body? Oh, my mom would look at me a particular way. My culture would look at me a particular way. Then it's like, why do I care about that? I'm a grown woman. I'm a grown man. It's like getting into those questions to realize that it's caught up in maybe a belief, a narrative of attachments. Now, when you hear the word attachments, as long as you're clinging to something, it will persist. And the more you persist, the more you resist, the more it'll persist. So you want to be able to open it up with both asking those questions, releasing that energy in your body, and just keep going through the process. And I've seen many, many people heal through this experience. And I kind of spelled it out just now with you, and it kind of sounds linear, but when I'm in the experience working with people, it doesn't sound this methodical. I'm just doing it for the sake of this interview.
Right. And I love what you're saying. It is, this is the collective epidemic that we all carry as a society that's been so suppressing sexuality in so many ways and giving us mixed messages and creating such a big dissonance between, women that how they should feel about their sexuality and pleasure, and in the context of religion. And we all have to actually go through that inquiry of what we carry from society, from our mother, from our father, from our lineage, right?
The energy is very strong in there, and I have many friends who are coaches. Many of them are acquaintances. I see most of this, say, on Facebook, and I can see the difference. And there's no judgment what is better and who's doing better work or anything like that. But I noticed that with the women who have, say, been traumatized and have moved through it fully and are able to hold that space for clients now, seem to not be so provocative. It's not like they're in their face like, here's my body, love my breasts, F you, what you think, man. They're kind of come from that light space because they've moved that, and we can get into the chakras. The trauma is in the first and second chakra, but also moves into the third chakra, the solar plexus, your sense of self and how you show the world. So if a person had been sexually traumatized and had shame and didn't know how to deal with the emotions, and their sense of safety and being rooted in their first chakra is not there, then their sense of self in the solar plexus might come out as being needy, or feeling like their sense of self is through a man having sex with them, or where it's still, even if they move to a space, I'm healing this, then it's still come from that solar plexus, F you, here's my body. And you see that with a lot of tantrikas, where they're just almost like, it seems very over sexual and kind of almost to the fetish energy, and it still has this kind of like moving through it angst type of vibe. And then when I noticed that when people really heal it fully, it moves into the heart, and then it comes to more that heart space where then a person's communicating through their throat of like, this is my body and this is what I can do, not F you in your face. So there's a lot of people who are doing this work, they're still moving through that experience still themselves. And I can see that. But the energy has to move up. It has to move up for it to be fully healed. So I wanted to talk about that too. You didn't ask that question. It's like the trauma is in this part of the body. And I've seen people even do this where they look like zombies, whether it's men or women, where they've cut off this part of their body where they're just like in their heads and they just don't want to be touched. They seem so non-sexual, like they just don't even have experienced the deliciousness of life, and they just cut all that stuff off because they're afraid if they put that out there, then they'll attract more of that. And then you have those who are just still way in that, and that's still their story. A fully integrated spiritual human being is to be both. It's to be sexually alive, but also be able to come from that Christ consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, but to bring it all the way up to all your centers and have that flown throughout your body into all.
Right. Yeah, that's the integration of conscious sexuality that moves through the body.
Yes. Did you
Yeah.
agree with what I just said? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, I do know what you're talking about. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I
And
usually see women who are, I don't like to use this word because there might be a weird connotation to it, but let's say I see usually the women who are more mature who've moved into that space.
right. And in some way, maybe this is our journey as individuals to find that, to tap back into that
Hmm.
flow of life, to bring the aspect of the divine into the body and into lovemaking.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
sexual energy is one of the most powerful energies on a planet, and two people
mm,
had sex for you to come forth. So it's
exactly.
very God said, and God sent, and it's energy, and it's not even about the act of sex itself. If you cut off your genitals by how you think about it, if you don't masturbate and so forth, where do you produce your sex hormones? So you're going to age. I mean, people who age better or look younger or have this more kind of vibrant energy, they're very sexually alive. And that doesn't mean that they have to masturbate, whatever. It might be that there's this very sensual when they do gardening. It might be that when they're painting, they feel connected to that sensual part. So this is not even about sexual healing in a sense so you can have great sex or have long orgasms. It's about to get this energy moving and flowing again so you live a long life.
Right. It's about your vitality. It's about your health and
Yes.
creativity and
Mhm.
well-being.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
even doctors prescribe more sex these days. So even science catched up with this.
Yes. Absolutely.
Right. And so you claim that you can move completely beyond sexual wounds, that you can just heal them and live happy life ever after,
Yes.
right?
I've seen it. I mean, I mean, I've seen this countless times. To be honest, I even got an email some from Facebook who just referred two people to me, and if I remember, that's what we healed. So
Right.
they said, "You did really great work." And me like, "Do you still do this work?" I'm like, "Yes." That was like 10 years ago. So yes, constantly. Because again, remember, a big part of this share here, and why I was excited to share it, and hopefully everyone will catch on to this. It might not be the sexual event itself. It might be that and both. It might be that and how you look at it, how you relate to yourself, how you think your culture, you know, talks about it, to what happened when you told people about it, how they shut down. You know, for example, I've worked with at least 500 rape victims, okay? And
Mm.
I've had at least 10 tell me they were raped and were laughing. And they would say it right at the end of the session, "Oh, by the way, I was raped." I'm like, and they're smiling. I'm like, and I learned that the incongruence with that was that they learned to make it lighter because other people get uncomfortable. So they would say it in a more kind of casual, funny way or something. And it was like their defense mechanism so they're not shut down or make the other person awkward. So that just gets pushed more down into their body again. And, you know, this is a different topic, but this will hit home and help everyone kind of understand this. My mother died this year, March 2nd, and I, I stopped sharing this with other people. My mom was Buddhist, my dad is Jewish. We celebrated death as part of living. So my family got through it quicker than any other family I ever seen. And not just that, is where when people would talk to me, they said the not wrong thing, but it was annoying. It was like their shit. It was how they haven't like resolved death in their life, how they're still processing their parents' death from 10 years ago. And they would make it about them to where they didn't know how to talk about it. They just didn't know how to talk about it. So I would tell people, just when a person passed away, maybe approach that person by saying, "How are you doing with this?" Because you don't know. You don't know where they are. And so same thing with sexual wounds or what had happened. It is a same type of story that has gone into the shadows. You know, death, sexuality, you name it. It's like, so it becomes more difficult to process because it's not supported by possibly our culture. And so you have to create your own definitions of what it's going to mean to you. And that would be, going out of maybe what you would usually do outside of your community. I have a cousin who is an Orthodox Jew, and she had stuff happen, and the rabbi was saying, a male rabbi just telling her stuff, and going, oh my God. Of course, I was like saying, just tell him to fuck off. But I got her to go outside the community because it was just perpetuating a man telling her what she should do with herself. And so she got the help. So it's where you have to go out, possibly, and there's a lot of great material out there. You have someone here to work with you on the summit also who specializes in this. But when you find out new information, you will be blown away. You'll be like, oh my God. We, like, at least in the West here in the United States, we're still in a dark age when it comes to the dark ages, when it comes to sexuality. Whew.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And, when I started my journey more than 20 years ago, I felt that I could barely find resources, whereas now there's so many people that pioneer in ways, and there's so much happening that it makes my heart sing. And I also want to even take it further to the next step and saying that I am coming from the approach that there is no accidents and everything is in perfection. And so if experience that we call trauma happens, it might have so many blessings in disguise that when we actually go through the healing process, that's how we grow into perhaps our purpose or our destination or our expansion of consciousness. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with you, and I would never say it since I have never been sexually abused. And I'm going to make a generalization. You as a woman being able to say that, and might be safer for you to say that, no differently than I'm a full-time father. I raised my child on my own. So mothers have a tendency to support me and are surprised. But I can get away with stuff and say things. And for the most part, I think women support me by their thinking, well, here's a man who actually is doing it and knows the experience. And so I'm an advocate for supporting stay-at-home moms, and that is a job. So I get it. So with that being said, it's yes. So if someone were to show up and say that this had happened to them, of course, I'm not going to go into talking about law of attraction, this the spiritual jargon right there. I'm going to be right there with them. But more than often, that's where we go, and they come to that destination, and it's coming from them talking about it. They start connecting to so much more. It's like this. This is what I've come to know about trauma, and that is this. Most of the greatest mentors that I have worked with, most of the greatest minds that I have read and so forth, came from some challenge, came from something that had kept them down or whatever else, whether it's Viktor Frankl, who was in Auschwitz, and he wrote a book in the concentration camp, and then he created his own techniques. But in that, one of the things that was profound that he said was that, he said that he learned how to find God in the bowl of dirty water and a fish head. He prayed that this would give him nutrition. This is what the Germans were, the Nazis were cutting off the heads and putting in a fishbowl, and that's what he had to eat. But he continued to connect to this light within himself, and he was awakened in that, And so in that, I've seen many people's journeys come from that, and there's so much more that they can do. Now, it doesn't mean that you dismiss what had happened, but what's more important, I think what you're trying to say here is this, is that if this is a thing that has been holding you back in your life, if this is the story that has been holding you back, and there's a lot of energy of talking about it and put into holding it back too that you might not be aware of, imagine what can happen in your life when you no longer have those constraints, when you're finally out of that cave and into the light. I think that's what you're saying here.
Right.
Correct?
Correct. Yes, and you can't suppress it because it actually keeps knocking on your door, wants to be resolved. Right? It's a life force energy that got somewhere entangled or mutated, and as you said, it takes energy to keep it at bay. Right? To
Yes.
suppress it, it
Hmm.
actually consumes energy from the body,
Yes.
and by releasing it, you release your flow, and by releasing your flow, you have better connection to the source,
Hmm.
right? Because nothing there stops the flow. And yeah, this is yeah, what I also wanted to share is that by unlocking the by unlocking the flow, yeah, by healing, by doing the work, there are so many keys that helps you to unlock your consciousness, to expand you further. So if you look at it as a blessing in disguise, as a something that happened for a reason, so shifting from a victimhood consciousness into what are my teachings here.
I wanted to share something because it's not really information that's out there. Do you have time? A couple minutes to share
Yes, yes,
something so it
yes,
can be very
yes,
helpful?
yes.
So, so first off, we are not saying that you were not victimized, but if you were victimized, then it happened in the past. So going back to that is putting and creating that continuity illusion of that story that you play. You keep victimizing yourself. So this is something that most neuroscientists don't talk about yet. Who knows when it will happen? And it has to do a lot with PTSD and so forth. So PTSD is seen as something very real, and I used to specialize in treating that. In fact, I wrote my dissertation on that, and so I know this work, and I've seen ritualistic abuse, meaning that I've worked with people who actually were in cults and used as sex slaves, and that has got to be, I would say, the darkest and hardest stuff to work with when it's it's constant and whatever else. And so PTSD is like this, and you heard in this interview a little earlier, I shared that it's more how it's associated to your becoming as a woman or a man. It's like it gets integrated, so you're confused of, am I safe? Can I trust myself? And so forth. Now imagine that story. When I say that story, is that that is not integrated, but you keep trying to talk about the rape or that perpetrator or how could my filthy father do that, that fucking bastard and all of that. And yet when you're doing that, when you're thinking that, remember, you're speaking the words, but remember, you're creating those thoughts within your own consciousness. You're hardwiring the neural nets in your head to hold an attachment to that, therefore still hold the trauma as if it happened in your body today. It doesn't matter what you say, you're talking about it, you're victimizing yourself, you're hardwiring that in your body, and because those attachments, it cannot be released. And one last person that to understand the PTSD experience is that I worked with a client at a Hollywood Free Sunset Clinic in Hollywood, and this man started waking up every morning around 3:15 again because he was being interviewed by I forgot these detectives. And what happened? He was at a halfway house, so I don't know if he was in prison or what. Forgot that story. But someone tried to burn the building down, and the man who started the fire died. My client survived. And when they started asking him questions 2 years later, he was waking up, smelling smoke. And he couldn't understand this. Same thing, listen to the story. We started talking. I said, who was this man to you? He said, he was like one of the first people I became close to. And then I said, oh, I said, well, what did you really feel? He said, well, I want to ask him what happened. Like, why did you do this? Didn't you think about killing me? I went, okay. But how? We went to the transparent belief. He said, I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed. He starts crying. I said, move into that experience. He moves an experience in being close to his brother, 13, 14 years old, 15 years old, being molested. We move from this, being betrayed by his brother, healed that, healed the betrayal. the PTSD went away. We never even talked about the fire. We never even talked about those events, him getting out of the fire. We didn't even talk about when he's, when the fire department was there, any of that. It was betrayal. And so what was locked in there was this confusion that had never been healed. So what we're sharing here is that, and that what can happen is that this can catapult you over the wall, your invisible wall, is that you might have other connections to your sense of self that no longer belong. You might have connections of stuff that has not been healed. It's all hardwired in the PTSD or the trauma. I'm not saying PTSD does not exist, but I also know it can be unwired. I know it can be unwired. I know it can be shifted, but it takes exploring everything that we're sharing here. And I'm sure you've had these experiences also where a person just starts crying, releasing, or body's contorting and this, that, and they don't say anything, and it's healed. So whether it's with energy or both talking and guiding and energy, or just talking, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it's just make sure your body's connected to it and you have a visceral experience.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't have explained it better. Yes, that's exactly it. And so it might be that whatever happens is actually trying to bring that to a closure, right? So there is that initial trauma that created some wiring, and every other experience actually magnifying that until we solve it, right?
So it's an interesting thing. This is going to be, most people don't realize this until I say it. So for example, if a client calls me up and they say, I have a problem, I'm trying to work on this, I've been through this for a long time. I'll say, what's interesting is in order for you to say, I have this problem and this is that, there has to also be another reality you're tapping into that's watching that to talk about it, because when you're in a trauma, you don't talk about it, you're in it. So you already have two split realities. Once when you're victimized or what you don't want in your life, or in this moment what you want. You could not be on a phone call with him right now if both those creations within your mind didn't already exist. So that already means that you're already on a path of clarity before you made this phone call. The person is watching this summit, there's some party knowing that I'm not a victim. Why would I be getting help? Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this. You'd be saying, screw this, it's not for me, or it wouldn't even show up on your page or whatever else. So you're here. You're being called here because there's a part of you that knows that this is not the way you need to live, and that there's so much more. And so it comes back to that. It's like there's people heal themselves through neurofeedback. Now, this is what's interesting. This is what cannot be proven by scientists, and that is this. You cannot measure consciousness. So when you're looking at a neurofeedback machine and it's making beeps and sound, you're looking at a screen or whatever it is, you're controlling that. But what the hell is controlling that if you're damaged? So consciousness overrides your brain. Consciousness is bringing you to the summit. Consciousness overrides all of that. It is when the human goes into but me, this, you hardwire denser matter into the pain, and those associations don't free that up. It is raising your vibration. It's moving to this higher consciousness to override that, and to shift that in your body.
Right. And you can't really run away from it. You can't hide away. It's within your being. It's within your body. So, if you choose to go through the rabbit hole of actually bringing it from the shadow into the light and going through the emotions, I loved how you say, feel the shame in your body, feel how it feels fully. Go into that shame state and then come out of there knowing that you now opened up your container to allow capacity for also more joy, because you went to the depth of the emotion, right?
Your bowl is open to be filled up with new things from life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Most people are having sex like this. They're just tight in their bodies.
Right. And from
and
here
you don't even have
up,
to be, yeah, and you don't
yeah,
even have to have sexual abuse to be that way.
right.
So, you know, for example, if you ever hug somebody and they have this kind of awkward stuff, that's it's a good chance how they have sex also, guarded. So the emotional energy is not just going to free you up, it's going to improve your sex life.
Right. So it's very well worth the journey of dealing with it, right? Of
Absolutely.
actually, yeah, doing this work. You do it once, you go through it. You need courage. You need to make the choice.
Mhm.
But once you do and you go through it, it's actually not as difficult as the mind makes believe of it,
Mhm.
right?
And I've witnessed, and I've heard psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors make it worse for a victim survivor by their analysis, and because in their mind, if this happened to you, it's going to take a long time to heal. In that, if your dad was this way, your mother's way, it's going to be this way. There's this. That's not how we heal. We don't heal in a linear way or in the head. And reason why I bring this up also is because that's their story. That's their interpretation. Everybody can heal this, you know, on their own time. There's no set rule or way to do it. And
Right.
so, um, you know, and when I bring up that, it's not to put down other experts. It's just, it's what it's more that if you are listening to me, you think I sound different, or you're afraid to see someone because of that experience you had, I'm here to validate you. I'm here to say, you're right. There's a lot of people who should not work on us, especially if they're not comfortable in their body.
Yes, I cannot
Okay.
agree more. I cannot
Yes.
agree more.
Yes.
I
I've
know.
heard people
Yeah.
say, I felt worse. I felt almost like it, you know, it can even be working with a male therapist and you're sharing a story and you feel like he's getting turned on. I mean, I've
Mhm.
heard it all. I've
Mhm.
heard it all, and you're not alone in this. That's why this is an interesting thing to heal, because how am I supported if there's, you know, perverts out there? How do I heal myself if someone else does not process it fully? And this is why we're sharing all this, because they do exist. You know, we're here. That's why we're talking about it. We're here to help educate you. Know that no, there's some really good people that can help this, and there's some other people. Yeah, they're still working through
Right. Yeah, we brought it up quite a few times in the sessions that you have to know who you going to, because there are many people that still playing out their own fantasies and wounded
it.
sexuality
Yes, yeah. There's
in the
people
name
who
of
do taunt.
healing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's sexual predators and that, like the tantra community, and it's
Mm.
mostly by men. You're going to be healed by my wand or whatever. It's like bullshit, bullshit. The thing is that if you're here and it's going, oh my God, what do I do? Well, my recommendation would be this. You know, find a very supportive, loving friend and be with you in those conversations, and don't go in that room without that friend. Bottom line, have someone support you, hold your hand, whatever it takes. If that's what you need for this journey to begin, so be it.
I love it. I love
Yes.
it. Yeah, find a good friend to walk you through it. Yeah,
Absolutely. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I love it. So yeah, we reaching to the end of our time together, and I really enjoyed your input. It is absolutely in alignment with this summit and the message that comes across, that everything is healable. Yeah, is there a word like that, or
Yeah.
it's
It works for
my,
me.
yeah. We can heal those sexual wounds, and we have to heal those sexual wounds if we want to live a life of joy and pleasure and bliss and ecstasy and vitality and creativity and
Mhm.
purpose and the relationships. I know you also talk a lot about relationships and how that correlates to our sexuality. And yeah, thank you so much for showing on this summit and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. I love talking about this, especially in
Yeah,
a more expansive way.
yeah. And I also know that you have a beautiful gift to share with the audience. Would you like to talk about it?
Yes, it's a book called Happiness Decoded, which is an interesting book to talk about since we're talking about sexual trauma. However, in the book is about decoding a lot of what I'm talking about, including sexuality. So the premise of the book is noticing these programs that have taken over our lives that are not even originally our ideas and judgments. And yet, we are living a particular life and trying to figure out, why does this not feel good? Where am I going? And where am I supposed to go? In the book, it breaks that down, and there's like unique exercises to go through to process that so you can arrive to happiness. Because again, even with this, if you're able to basically peel back, the onion, if you're able to release the trauma, and there are exercises in a book to do this, you can transform. You can transform and to happiness. Happiness exists already. It's already there. It's just getting all that other stuff out of the way. Like for example, imagine a baby. They are naturally laughing and smiling all the time. Oh my God. They're so happy no matter what, okay? And so it is when they become older and they create this narrative and they create this continuity illusion of where they were and what they're going to do that starts to become hardwired. Then they start losing that smile. It is to go back to that space of innocence. And this is to do this. See, I'm touching my fingers. Take a deep breath in and breathe this and do this. Tap your fingers like this and clap also. You have meridians in your hands here. This connects to your heart. This is why babies naturally clap on their own. You're doing your own acupuncture doing this. Return back to that state. And that's what this is about.
That is so beautiful. So much gratitude for this beautiful gift. And grab it. It sounds delicious. So yeah, thank you so much. And it's amazing how actually healing is in simple ways, right? It's not complicated. It's in the breath, it's in the clapping, it's in the shaking, it's in the laughing and dancing and moving.
Do this. Everyone's watching us. Try this. Get your hands here, go like this. Oh, look up. Try to have bad thoughts now. You can't.
No, you can't.
Here, meridians releases endorphins. Your body is your own pharmacy.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Ray. And if people want to get hold of you and maybe work with you personally, how can they find you?
The best way is to reach me at my website, which is raydoktor.com. Again, raydoktor.com. But also, if they get the book, they'll give them the information, my email, to reach me also.
Great. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Until the next time. Ciao.
Thank you.